Desperado for the first time?
Yes, I do. Desperado was always like stuck out in my mind as one of my favorite movies because a lot of it, like I've got kind of a connection with it because it was filmed in Acuña, which is the town that borders the town that I was raised in. So it was like you recognize a lot of the streets and some of the shooting locations. There's a famous bar called the Corona Club where that big famous that shootout scene takes place, and so I'm like, I've been there. It's like 5 minutes away, so it was just really cool for me and all my friends to watch such a cool action movie that was basically filmed in our backyard. You know, right before I was born. You know, is or I think the year I was born is when that movie came out. But yeah, it's just one of those movies that everybody in my hometown knows and loves.
Yeah, I I live in New York now, so obviously it's a lot easier to find films that were filmed here.
Yeah,
But even then, I lived in London for a long time, seeing films that are films and TV shows that are filmed in London. I grew up in Minnesota, same deal, and being able to just say, ugh, that's exactly.
that's that place.
It's easy to feel like you have this kind of warm, like homey feeling connection to something when you can, like, it's. I have been there. I've walked on that street.
Yeah, there's this Instagram page that I follow, and I think I forget the name of it, but it's something having to do with like film locations and it's like it can be anything from like an old John Wayne movie, and it can be like a mountain range from like 50 years ago, and what it looks like now, or like an alleyway or something, and it's like a screen grab from the movie, and what it looks like now. And I always find that stuff really fascinating, especially like if it's if it's like a canyon or a mountain from like an old Western that I'm like, that's in black and white. And you're like, yeah, it still looks exactly the same, you know?
Yeah,
I guess 50 years in mountain time is like a fraction. It should look the same, right?
yeah. It's about
But
like
but anyway, yeah, it's really cool with Desperado, and in that bar that I was mentioning, Corona Club, is actually really cool because I filmed a music video at that same bar, and there's a lot of memorabilia. You know, there's a lot of posters from the film, a lot of cool pictures of Antonio Banderas and like Cheech, and everybody else that was in that film. Of course, Tarantino has a little cameo in the movie, and so there's just pictures of him, and it's just cool, man. You walk in there and you see all the cool stuff on the wall everywhere.
yeah, and that stuff as well, like seeing the impact that filmmakers have on the places where they film stuff, and when it's a specific location like that, like giving people basically a new revenue stream, a reason for people to
Yeah.
visit, and just forever kind of changing the character of that place because it's like this is where this thing happened. It's really cool.
Robert Rodriguez first made El Mariachi, which was an all
Hmm.
Spanish
Hmm.
film, which is really cool because and it was groundbreaking at the time. I'm sure you know all this stuff just from doing the research, but they did it for like I think $7,000 or $8,000, and they were able to pull this whole thing off. And uh, Carlos Gallardo, who's the lead in that movie, is actually a close friend of mine, and him and I have had wine together and we talk about it. It was just really cool because he was like, man, we were just a bunch of kids just trying to make it work with nothing, and then Columbia picked it up and made it a big deal, and that's when they went with a bigger budget to do the sequel, which ended up being Desperado, and then Once Upon a Time in Mexico was the third out of the trilogy of the movies. But it was really cool because that was also filmed in the same in Acuña too, the first one, and it's all in Spanish. But it's really interesting to see how they were able to kind of make it work with little to nothing, you know. And it's really really neat to see that happen. You know, like they were very to have the tenacity to do that, and I guess the guts to try to pull it off is pretty insane to me. You know, Rodriguez was really kind of a pioneer for doing that, I think, because low budget films like that weren't. Correct me if I'm wrong. I mean, it wasn't really a thing before then. I don't think.
Well, and that, I mean, it has become the stuff of legends. $7,000 budget is nothing. I mean, at that time, it was like that is less than the catering budget. Like people
Right.
would just be like, you can't make a movie for that much money. And he'd been, he tried to go to film school. His grades weren't good enough, and he had to like kind of figure out sneaky ways to make it happen. He, there's all of this stuff that just sounds made up. Like, somebody when they're trying to create the like mythos around how they became successful, he like did a medical trial to raise money. Like a good chunk of the $7,000 came from that.
Hmm.
It was like a month long, drug trial or something where he had to like,
Right.
experimental.
Yeah, he had to do like, yeah, like it was crazy stuff that how he had to come up with the money. And I've seen interviews of him talking about it, and everything from like making the homemade squibs and stuff to, like
Mhm.
I don't know how you'd pull that, especially the special effects part of it. It's not easy to pull off guns and people getting shot and stuff and make it look real with stuff, without real props or whatever. It's really fascinating to me how they were able to do that. And then when Desperado got made, there's like friends of my mom's that were like extras, and I'm like, oh my God, there's a scene where in Desperado where after that big shootout scene, there's like three girls and one guy that like walk in to try to go get a beer, and they see everybody, the aftermath of everything, and there's just a bunch of bodies everywhere. And
Mhm.
then, that there's a guy, his name's Kerr Wardlaw. He was actually my third grade teacher and like a family friend, and that's him. And then my mom's best friend, Blanca, that's her. And then two other people that still live in Del Rio, and they were young. I mean, they were at the time, I think they were maybe in college.
Mm.
And so yeah, they just needed extras. They just needed young kids to come, walk in like, oh my God, and then run out. And so it's funny, like I still watch that movie, and I'm like, oh my God, there's so and so. Or I'll take a picture and send it to Kerr Wardlaw, my old teacher, and be like, look, I'm watching this movie, and he's like, yep, that was my 2 seconds of fame right there.
Yeah, that's the other thing. Like, that like how specific the connections get when it isn't somewhere that's like a big city where
Mhm.
all things get filmed and it just kind of blends into everything, in like cities like New York or LA where there's actors everywhere, so it's like tons of different people who you might catch in lots of different things, and you don't have that kind of personal connection. But when it's filmed in a smaller town or city that you have a connection to, the likelihood that you're going to be able to see people, to spot people who it's like, I actually know that guy. um
Yeah.
yeah, it's crazy.
Have you seen Danny Trejo talk about his chest tattoo? That was the first time that Salma Hayek, right? Because
Mm.
she's in that's it's Salma that's in that in the movie.
Mhm.
Um, he had this, and everybody knows like Danny Trejo kind of had like a really rough upbringing, went to prison, like was before he made it in Hollywood and stuff. And when he first met Salma, he's like, "Oh my God, I've been looking for you my whole life. I have you on my," like he has this woman, this like Mexican woman, big on his chest, and looks like a spitting image of her. And he swears that it was like a destiny that they met, and that he had this chest tattoo of her. And I've seen interviews of her talk about it, and she's like, I was so weirded out because everybody was like, okay, there's this actor, and he's like a convict, but he's like really cool, and he's like cleaned himself up, and don't be freaked out. And like he like when they first met, he's like, oh my God, I've been waiting my whole life to meet you. And he ripped his shirt off and just showed her. And she's like, oh my God, this guy who's been to prison is now like got a tattoo, swears that I'm the person that he's got a tattoo of on his chest. And so I'm sure she was very wigged out by the whole thing. But Danny Trejo seems like a really sweet heart. And I think it's just funny to know that I was like, well, that was Desperado. That was in 1995 or 94, probably when they filmed it, and it came out in 95. And yeah, it's funny to hear them both talk about that, about meeting on set for the first
Mm.
time.
Yeah, especially when it's like this was kind of Salma Hayek's English language breakout
Right. And
project.
I guess that would have been Antonio Banderas' first English role, right?
He was in Mambo Kings in 1992. A crazy thing that I learned. 1992, he had to learn all of his lines phonetically because he didn't speak any English. 3 years later, he's in Desperado, and like I read an article where somebody who interviewed him on a press junket was talking about
Hmm.
it. She's like, his English is better than mine. He was using words that I don't know. Like, you know, three
That's
years.
crazy.
Yeah.
That's
Um,
crazy.
yeah. But he'd done some other stuff, but I think this was like one of his first leading man roles.
Yeah,
And definitely the thing that kind of set him on a path of being able to do Zorro and like, you know, bigger
for sure.
blockbuster stuff.
Oh, and so all the Zorro stuff was amazing. I mean, I can't even tell you how many times I wanted to be Zorro for Halloween when I was a kid. But definitely more than once. But and you know, one thing I've always appreciated about Robert Rodriguez is he uses a lot of the same actors, you know, in a lot of his films. Like I remember when I was a kid, how big Spy Kids was. Do you remember that? Do you remember the
Mhm,
Spy Kids movie? Like
mhm.
movies. Of course, he's in there. Um, Danny Trejo's in a lot of them, and him and Tarantino are similar in that sense that they like their guys and they like to put them in all their movies, you know.
Hmm.
Um, and I always just thought that was really really cool because you could kind of even if you didn't know who was directing the film, you could probably kind of try to figure it out just by just the way it was shot and who was in it.
Right. Yes.
Buscemi's in all that stuff too, and yeah, you know, like he's an unforgettable face. Like when you see him in a movie, you're like, oh wow.
Hmm.
But yeah, it was just it's like that's a cult classic, and especially in my hometown, everybody always still talks about those movies um and Robert. I've never met Robert. We have mutual friends, but I'd love to meet him. I know he's always hanging around Austin. People bump into him all the time.
Yeah. And that's the other thing, like his connection to he's a huge Hollywood director. He's obviously been very successful, but he is still very connected to his roots in many different ways. And I think these movies, this whole trilogy, I can't remember what they call the trilogy, but you know, El
Right.
Mariachi, Desperado, and Once Upon a Time in Mexico, that it was like building this foundation of who he was as a director, his style, which is really
Right.
distinct. The importance of, like he said, he really wanted to have uh, somebody with some kind of Latin ancestry
Right.
being a superhero, being an action hero, whatever, and that he hadn't seen that before. And he wanted to have that be a really important element of it, but also like choosing geography that was in some way connected to places that he knew. And I don't think that's really changed very much for him. You know, he obviously goes to different places to film and whatever, but yeah.
Absolutely. One thing like with what I do musically and my style, having grown up in Del Rio and being from the border, I and somebody who also who sings country music and also sings songs in Spanish. Like when I first started out, or you know, like I had like even just when it comes to wardrobe on stage, I'd told my stylist, I was like, "Have you ever seen the movie Desperado?" And you're like, "Yeah." I was like, "Well, look at what he wears." And I love how there's like a country thing to it, but it's also got like the mariachi thing. And you know, like I have a lot of these bolero jackets, and I'll wear like a white t-shirt, black pants, and it's got like this really nice balance of like it's got the Latin flair to it which represents kind of where I'm from, but it's also got the crooner thing. I've never been the kind of country artist that wears like a cowboy hat or whatever. Like I always would do my hair and would wear black pants and these cool mariachi jackets. I've always loved mariachi attire. It's very formal and it's very, but you know, it's got the boots too. So we based a lot of my stage wardrobe around what Antonio Banderas wore in that film. And we use that kind of as like a North Star. And I still wear a lot of that stuff too. And I've got like different colors that I can kind of mix match and stuff. But I remember telling my stylist, I was like, go back and look at what he's, you know, pull it up on Pinterest or whatever and look at that. And he's like, oh, okay. And he bought me a bunch of those cool jackets that are in line with what he was wearing in that film. So that it's kind of cool to have that film being shot in my hometown, me feeling connected to that movie and wanting to incorporate some of that into like what I do musically and aesthetically. Um,
Mhm.
and so that's like a big reason I picked this. this film to talk about, because it does have a deeper I do have a deeper connection with it because of what I do and how it influenced me and the way I kind of wanted to present myself to an audience, to try to find that cool balance between, like, it's got the Latin flair to it, but it's also still very much country, and nobody else really, at least amongst my friends and my colleagues and stuff, and everybody, and people that write songs and are in the entertainment business as well. Most of my friends are what I call like more hay bale country with the pearl snaps and the cowboy hat. So that's just never been my style. So I think it does help me kind of stand out a little bit, uh, because nobody really dresses like that or does what I do. No, none of my friends sing in Spanish or have the border town connection like I do. I'm kind of the only one, so I'm kind of proud of that. It kind of makes me feel like my artistry is a little bit more, is unique in that sense, and so I kind of lean into that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that kind of brings to mind to me the idea of authenticity, which is like it's an overused word. And in some ways, I think the meaning has been diluted because of the way that people use it. But in this instance, I think the thing that you and Robert Rodriguez share is that it's about developing a personal style, something that is distinct, that is like you said, sets you apart from other people because it is you, but it's not contrived. It's like, this is meaningful to you. There is a reason why you are doing all of these things. And, you have like carefully selected, clothing and created a style for yourself that represents who you are and represents the things you care about and where you've come from and, the movies you like. And, with Robert Rodriguez as well, it's like, he makes all different kinds of movies, but there's a very unique stamp.
Common thread, yeah, it's the same thing, and he's kind of alone. He's kind of on an island himself with his filmmaking too. I mean, like I said earlier, you can see something, you're like, I know who that is, and I think it's really really neat whenever you do have a style like that people can pick up on, and that goes for a lot of people. So like, producers are the same way. I can hear a record. I'm like, I know exactly who produced this record. Like Dave Cobb's got a thing. Like when it comes to Chris Stapleton or the early Jason Isbell records, there's a style of that you can kind of pick up on, and I think it's cool when you've got a fingerprint, and people can pick up on that, and Robert definitely is one of those directors that has that, which I think is, and so is, Tarantino's the same way. Like you can pick out one of his movies from a mile away, which is cool.
Yeah, and it makes sense that they're like friends and frequent collaborators because there is overlap in that Venn diagram. I mean, Steve Buscemi coming in at the beginning of Desperado, and that monologue is very like Tarantino-esque, or his, scene where he's like describing Bucho and saying what's coming. But there is overlap in their style, but it's also these two people who are, again, very distinct, but totally instantly recognizable, the things that they're doing, no matter what the subject matter, the genre they're working in, all that stuff. And it's very cool. It's like there are not a lot of movie directors that you can point to, and they're like household names, people that are known. And Robert Rodriguez as well. Like, I think he's such a charismatic guy. Like, he's handsome. He's someone who people see him, and he's not a movie star, but he is somebody who exudes that kind of charisma. And I think that's helped to set him apart too, is that he's like a character in and of himself outside of the films that he makes, that he's like a very strong representation of the movies that he makes, which is cool too.
Yeah, like we were watching, me and my band were watching the movie recently on the bus, and one of my favorite scenes is the Tarantino part where he's telling that really funny joke, and it's like a really long joke with like a great payoff. But yeah, I've always thought that scene was so funny, and it's got that shootout scene is one of the coolest. I love a good shootout. Like, I love a good thing. And I always thought that the more ridiculous it what it's like people getting shot in the chest with a shotgun and flying 10 feet back. I was like, that wouldn't really happen in real life, but it's just so cool to see it, just to make it over the top. You know, that's just, if you're like me, I'm like, oh, this is amazing. This is great. Let's rewind that and just watch that again.
Yeah, and it's such a clear stylistic choice. I've heard Robert Rodriguez talking about it and saying that the traditional flavor of a Western shootout is slow, and it's like people being like very calculated and measured and just like taking
Suspense.
their
Yeah.
time. Yeah, and there's like tension in the air, and he's like, I wanted this to be fast, so there's just like
Yeah.
stuff happening all around you at all times and just like chaos. And it has that like foundation of a Western feeling, but it's so distinctly his because he's established a different pacing for it. Yeah, it's great.
That's interesting. I never really thought about that. Because if you think of like old Westerns that was slow and it was a lot of suspense.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess I never thought about that Tarantino and Robert Rodriguez have that style where it's very fast and very exaggerated, I guess would be a good word to describe it. But like I said, I mean, especially if you're like a young kid, like when I was, 12, 13, I was like, yes, the blood and the gore, like the more the better, and I always thought that was so cool.
I read that it was initially it got given an NC-17 rating because there was so much blood and so much like too much, and there was a scene he cut completely because the censors had like turned it into Swiss cheese, like cut out so many different parts of it were just like, you can't do this, you can't do this, and what was left was just like barely even made sense anymore. Another thing that I think he has brought, Robert Rodriguez has brought from his early like scrappy days of having to make something incredible out of basically nothing, is that pace. Having to like say, we've got $7,000, we're going to do this quick. It's got to be like boom, 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 moving on to the next thing. And he came into Desperado and was saying to people like, we're going to use that same kind of really fast filmmaking, and we're going to do like 500 setups in a day. And like everyone who worked for him was like, you're no, we can't. That's not how this works. No. And when you have things that like, there's tons of really quick editing, every time the camera changes perspective, that's not like, we just move the camera here. It's like everybody working in that room. You've got a crew of, dozens of people. Everybody has to shift around. There's like, tons of time taken to make sure that everything is switched to a different angle. And he's cutting nonstop, just going like left and right and all over the place. But he pulled it off.
Yeah, just things like that. That's creative. I feel like Robert was really good at making something so memorable with very little too. I just love good writing. I love good ideas. I love to see something like, that was cool, and it was actually really, really simple.
And like to me, everything that you're saying kind of boils down to specificity and saying the way you perform your songs, the way you write your songs, the way you tell stories, the way that novelists tell stories when they're describing the color of someone's eyes, the texture of their hair, all of those little details that paint this picture for the audience so that they know exactly what you're trying to say. Blood smearing across the wall from Antonio Banderas' arm, whatever. Little images that, like you said, it isn't about spending tons of money. It isn't about being flashy. It isn't maybe even things that people pay that close attention to, but even if it's subconscious, it builds this world. It builds this picture of, it enriches the story that you're trying to tell and makes it vivid and more present in people's minds. And it really takes skill. It's something that I think all good art shares, is this like unique vision and your ability to deliver that in a way that makes it so that people can really share in what that vision is.
For sure. I completely agree. Yeah. I think Robert did that with that film and all his films, really. When you can say a lot with hardly anything, I think that's just good writing. I think that's keep saying, a great idea. I'll take a great idea over anything, when it comes to art and stuff. So I think that's why I'm such a big fan.
Yeah. I think that is a beautiful note to finish on. That that kind of encapsulates everything we've been talking about. So thank you so much,
dude. Thank you, man. This was awesome.
Hey, do you want more conversations with incredible people talking about the movies and music they love? Then subscribe to the Spark Parade YouTube channel.